So basically, Antonovsky views the continuum model. So he proposes the continuum model, and he mentions that if we start from the assumption that the human system, all living systems, so to speak, is inherently flawed, subject to unavoidable entropic processes and unavoidable final death, which what follows is a set of ideas which can provide a theoretical basis. A continuum model which sees each of us at a given point in time, somewhere along a healthy or dis-ease continuum, is, I believe, a more powerful and more accurate conception of reality, one which opens the way for a strong theory of health promotion. So as I mentioned, what I feel is very inspiring, and I think a point of connection to resilience and other ideas about health theories, is this thermodynamic approach, complexity approach, and also I think a realistic approach that I think avoids denials and looks at human life as a life that is subject to change. So change becomes an inseparable part of human systems. And I think I feel if we adopt such mindsets, we're more likely to be in a place of agency, which I explain later is one of the most important components of building resilience. So this is the model, the continuum model that he provides, and apologies for the quality. I couldn't find a better quality photo and image online. So this is a continuum model that shows the state of well-being of a system as a dynamic state that is always in a continuous process of alteration toward either better well-being, that is more of life essence, or toward deterioration, and unfortunately, and finally also death. There are components of sense of coherence that I explain in the next slides that help the system, the state of a system, to be in either in a state of health or disease. These components are active forces that through their interactions and the processes involved, the system moves its state toward health or well-being. So the sense of coherence model and salutogenesis, as I said, is a mix between a Latin terminology of salus, which is health, and Greek phrase genesis or origin. The sense of coherence, or SOC, is defined as a global orientation that expresses the extent to which one has a pervasive, enduring, though dynamic feeling of confidence. And this sense of coherence is a three-dimensional, complex, and I think synthetic feature that allows the organisms to be in a continuous adaptation and hence maybe resiliency disposition. It is consists of comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. Of these components, meaningfulness is the most important one that I explain a little bit later. Comprehensibility is the cognitive component of health. Manageability is that instrumental and behavior component, and meaningfulness is the motivational component. Comprehensibility is the belief that things happen in an orderly and predictable fashion, and a sense that you can understand events in your life and reasonably predict what will happen in future. So in comprehensibility, what we really see that well-being is not just a bodily response, it's also a mental, it has a mental facet into it, that there is indeed a deep belief within the organism that there is a level of control in the environment and within the organism. So he can really, or she can arrive to a level of understanding and sense making of the events that organism is subject to. I call it a body-brain kind of mental model facet of health. Manageability, or the instrumental or behavior component is a belief that you have the skills or ability, the support, help, or the resource necessary to take care of things, and that things are manageable and within your control. So here is also connected with the wiring of the brain, nervous system, the connection between the environment and the organisms, the interface, and also I think the perception of the organism, of the things that are that are happening in its immediate and internal environment. Meaningfulness is the motivational component, as I mentioned, a belief that things in life are interesting and a source of satisfaction, that things are really worthwhile and that is good reason or purpose to care about what happens. This part of well-being is a mix between mind, consciousness, awareness, and I think a little bit of mindfulness. The most important part of health, according to Antonovsky, is the meaningfulness, because if the organism loses his or her sense of purpose and understanding of the value of life, and no matter the other components and the strengths of other components, it is extremely difficult to motivate the person or individual or organism to take care of himself or herself. So what I think it's interesting from this model is this deep component of deep connection to life system, that well-being is not just something that is achieved in the body, but also in the connection and interconnection of the body and the environment, of the body and the surrounding space, of the body and the interactions that the body has with its supportive systems, and also with the interpersonal relationships and the relationships that the person has. So I think the last component of meaningfulness is kind of like a super meta level of well-being, that the more meaningful connections are built throughout life, the chance of well-being increases. Another model that inspired me quite a lot in my research is the research done by Professor David Agus. And he has done an extensive research on cancer patients. And he also, like Antonovsky, arrives to this conclusion. Of course, he was also inspired by complex adaptive systems. Then we need to have a complexity approach to well-being. And he says it is helpful to see human body as a complex adaptive system that is able to cross around multiple states. And in doing so, when the body is in the state of disease or dis-ease, according to Antonovsky, such as cancer or heart disease, it is better to say that the body is cancering. So the thesis that Agus is providing is that let's not look at the disease and lack of health as just the fixed state, but let's look at them as a kind of a verb that is happening in space and time. So by saying that the body is cancering, so we're taking control, we're looking at the body as a dynamic system, instead of just saying that the state of a disease is only happening in an isolated part of the body, and we need to provide diagnosis or treatments that are attacking those cancerous cells in a closed environment. So he says that in short, cancer or heart disease are verbs, not nouns, because essentially these diseases are not single diseases of an individual cell. They're rather a complex emergent system that through complex interaction disturb the healthy state of the body and cause the body to reach into an switch into an undesirable state. Again, I think when I look at all these models and connect them to resilience, I think the underlying philosophy that can be helpful in providing new theoretical and also conceptual and even quantitative models of well-being and resilience is the approach of complexity that puts the agent, the system, the organism, or an organization in a multi-dimensional environment and provides a space for dialogue and also interdisciplinary approach and transdisciplinary approach. Another side to well-being that I wanted to add and mention that is included into the philosophy of longevity plus research group at the VUB that we established is looking at sustainability. In fact, Goal number 3 of sustainability is also connected to health, and it is about good health and well-being. There are different indicators that are important in this goal. There are agendas and objectives that by 2030, the aim is to reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70% per 100,000 live birth. So I'm not going to read all of them, but what is very interesting is that without a systemic approach, indeed, it is impossible to meet these indicators and goals by such long period of only 9 to 10 years by 2020, 30. So I think if you look at the 17 goals of sustainability and not just pick out the goal number 3, which I did here, it is really obvious that well-being is really a function of infrastructure well-being, is a function of economic well-being, is a function of innovation well-being, is a function of collaboration well-being, is a function of political well-being. So well-being and health is really connected to all aspects of human life. Now, I extracted some of the latest models of World Economic Forum, the model that they provided for future of health and healthcare. They created this model that shows the complexity of different components that are connected to, that are influencing, that will influence the future of health and healthcare. And you see like the healthcare of technology, preparation for responding to pandemics and epidemics, enabling access to health, preserving health, sustainability of health care systems are all integral parts of the whole health system. So I think when we speak of well-being, we need to understand that well-being has soft sides and hard sides, like engineering. We need to really focus on building infrastructures that support well-being of individuals. At the same time, the well-being of individuals, people can do things on their own in order to increase their well-being. Next slide is about global health. So, and as we stack all of these together, then you can see the connection and interconnection between these components and how they play and bounce on each other. The global health is a function of global health governance, data collection and communication, preparation for pandemics, sustainable development and universal coverage, environmental health and climate change, shifting demographics and lifestyle. And again, from each of these, if you click on each of these, which you can do on a website, you can really see the complexity behind just a terminology that we say well-being and health is a very complex, multidimensional concept that I think it requires global conversation. And I think that is what Longevity Plus Research Group stands for, that really promoting a global conversation between different scientists and hopefully coming up with ideas and models that can be used and applied in our communities. And then aging, which is another part of Longevity Plus Research Group in World Economic Forum, they say that it's a function of social welfare programs, elder caregiving, workplace and workforce change, innovation readiness, health and functional ability, the silver economy, age-friendly infrastructure. Well, I don't really like this model, to be very honest with you, because it's really kind of, as I mentioned in one of those emails that I sent earlier, I think 2 weeks ago, the aging is really defined as like the silver economy. I suppose it's connected with when we age and the hair basically turns into gray. So I think the model is not very inspiring. The model is really, I think it's not a proactive model, it's a very passive model. And I think puts forward assumes that aging equals basically deterioration, which is something that I am really inspired in this longevity plus research to really redefine the concept of aging and have a more dynamic, proactive, and I think inspiring model, and looking at aging as something valuable, not something that is just about losing order and deterioration of human potential and capacity. And I think the model also, another problem is that when we say age-friendly infrastructure, I suppose that it kind of puts forward this assumption again that people would need support. So we need to have investment for infrastructures that are supporting deterioration rather than like investing in infrastructure that maintain well-being rather than being passively engaged with aging individuals and population. So now moving to resilience and then later connecting them. But what is resilience? Resilience is a transdisciplinary concept. It's extremely complex. It's multidimensional, and there are three important components of that are needed to be considered. First of all, is the exposure to stress. Without stress, we cannot talk about resilience. So more often in literature, resilience is defined based on the significant levels of stress, such as earthquakes, pandemics, abuses, really devastating events. Mechanism of coping, that is adaptive or maladaptive behaviors, and then result of coping behaviors, that is multi-level processes. I picked certain definitions that are connected to health. The first definition is connected to the health of an engineered material. So it's not the well-being as a body, but the health of a material in an engineering point of view, which is health. Resilience in the pure materialistic sense represents an elastic behavior and the ability of a material to recover its original shape following a deformation. If a material is able to retain its original form, it is considered as flexible and of a well-designed texture or well-engineered. In a more of psychological point of view, resilience is seen as an interactive process that unfolds over time and which is continuously influenced by ongoing change in the context. Another definition views resilience as a composite attributes of states of a system, which commonly constitutes a time-variant vector of substates of a system of all physical and natural states. Given the inherent characteristics of such systems, their resilience will deteriorate over time. And last but not least, a health-oriented really definition that is inspired by public health, that the capacity of health actors, institutions, and populations to prepare and effectively respond to crisis, maintain core functions when a crisis hits, and informed by lessons learned during the crisis, reorganize if conditions required. In my view, I look at resilience as a synthetic and continuous property, partially made by our actions and partially made by our planning policies. And I view resilience in this method because I would like to focus on a systemic approach and not just look at resilience as something happens in the closed boundaries of an organism. So a resilience of a system is really influenced by the actions that that organism takes, but also because of the design of that environment and the policies that are put forward. I define resilience as a natural, malleable, and system-level property that enables social systems to optimally perform in the space between stimuli and response during stressful conditions. My definition of resilience is very inspired by the experience of Viktor Frankl in concentration camp. That I think it is one of the most, the extremist events that could happen to an individual. And the way he views resilience, he views adaptation and creation of sense of meaning in his approach, which is called logotherapy, therapy through creation of meaning. I think what happens in that space when disasters or stressors enter to the internal ecosystem of an organism, and the ongoing and subsequent responses, it is where we need to look at resilience. It is where we look at the agency and the power of individuals. And I think it's where really the whole story takes place. I provide a systemic model of resilience that is really a chain reaction of many level processes starting together and kicking off each other one after the other. First of all, the stress enters the system, and when it enters the ecosystem of an organism, the very first thing that happens is the brain registers that stress and starts the process of interpretation. And if I go back to the model of it, here is where the connection between health begins, and the connection between salatogenesis and the model that Aaron Antonovsky provided. That if the brain views and perceives that stress as a source of threat, the chain reaction that starts between that space of response and stimuli is qualitatively different. That is, if the brain views stress as something that is of a threatful nature, the subsequent response could be maladaptive resiliency. It increases the cortisol levels, and then it taxes attention, it taxes focus, and after that, the process of absorption of shocks, which happens at micro scale, compensates. At the mesoscale, something that it is in between, like the connection between organism and the environment, the process of reorganization happens, is where the organism starts to interpret and give meaning and value and direction to the energy that is discharged by this stressful situation within that internal ecosystem of that individual. In this level, what is very important is those elements of meaningfulness that I described earlier in the model of salatogenesis, that goals, purposefulness, resource levels, mobilization, all of them provide a trajectory that the organism can manage his or her adaptation response. And at the macro scale, the retention of key functions happen, where basically the viability of organism lies. It is openness, situational awareness, level of connection, and then navigation. All of these are different processes that would help the individual to maintain its resiliency posture. And the adaptation, apologies, and the outcome of these processes is either positive or negative. Well, this is another level of the same model that I don't go into the details because it's a I think it's a very complex model that I made, but I wanted to just demonstrate the inspired by the model of salatogenesis. I also view resilience as in a continuum model that is, the organism is either moving toward thriving stage or toward collapse, which is defined as death in the model of salatogenesis. And then what I did, basically, I said that, well, resilience and also well-being, if salatogenesis is defined by sense of coherence that I described earlier, that is a mix of cognitive behavior and also meaningfulness connection that would help an organism to move toward well-being or death, then we can say like resilience can be a complex function of many different functions moving and influencing system availability of resources for adaptation responses in the process of life. So basically resilience as a synthetic and complex variable that consists of agency, pathway and goals, sense of coherence, flow of information, meta-level learning, attention, secure attachment, protective factors and external environments, life satisfaction, well-being and decision-making, redundancy and resourcefulness, resilience engineering, which is also inspired by another model of resilience engineering in the engineering discipline. And I don't describe all these components here today. By degeneracy and by level 5 leadership. Level 5 leadership also, it's another concept that I looked at when I was defining and designing this model as a leadership model that is based on meta-awareness and provides the leader and puts the leader in a highly mindful state, being able to be open to the flow of information that is coming to the environment of the organism. Toward the thriving end of the spectrum, the outcome is creation of a high hope person, salutogenesis, which is health, harmony and balance, high performance team, creativity and flow, low anxiety, post-traumatic growth, eustress, which is positive stress, and strong performance, robustness and rapidity, safety and organizational well-being, evolutionary innovation, and great companies. So basically, all of these components are inspired by different models of resiliency and well-being of different systems. And I stacked them all together and I said, well, all of these are true in their own right, but if we can put them together, we can have a global perspective on what can create a resilient and healthy system. And this is the description of each of them that I'm not going to read, but you will get the slides so you can read them for yourself. Well, this is, I think, the end of my presentation. I just wanted to share with you my own personal experience with water fasting based on an article that I found, which uses alternative models of therapy and well-being, such as yoga therapy and polyvagal theory. I did a 3-day fasting, intermittent fasting and meditation, basically to recover from the shock that I received after my father passed away because of COVID. So I want to read a little bit on the discovery that they made based on the model that provided for yoga therapy, that high resilience is correlated with quicker cardiovascular recovery following subjective emotional experiences, less perceived stress, greater recovery from illness or trauma, or better management of dementia and chronic pain. Compromised resilience is linked to dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system through measurements of vagal regulation. And also my own experience, I was very inspired by this book. I don't know if you've read this book. If not, I highly recommend it, by Van der Kolk. It's about everything that happens when a traumatic experience is experienced by a human being. It has a lot of case studies of combat case studies, abuses, losses, and it's one of the most holistic and I think well-respected models of creating healing and building resilience. Well, according to him, trauma is universal. What it means by universality, it means that trauma is experienced by all organisms the same. So you can build a model of trauma, basically. You can have different approaches to heal trauma, by top-down approach, by taking medication, and bottom-up. Top-down, it's something that I think we naturally do by talking, reconnecting with others, and allowing ourselves to know and understand what is going on. And while processing the memories of the trauma, taking medicines that shut down inappropriate alarm reactions, or utilizing other technologies that change the way that the brain organizes information. And then by bottom-up models, that is allowing the body to have experiences that deeply and viscerally contradicts the helplessness, rage, or collapse that results from trauma. So my own experience with water fasting, I think for me was very interesting because I experienced all these 3 layers. I just used water as my own medicine. So I didn't do any medication, even though I was very upset and shocked. So for me, that experience of 3 day not eating anything, I think it created an observation space for me to look at myself in a different way and look at myself as I experienced the trauma and the loss. And then the function of vagus nerve, I think, is very interesting because it's a global, I think it's one of the most complex nerves pathways in the body that influences all, I think, all parts of the organism. And I think it shows that stressful situation can really have and have really systemic impacts on the body. And I think if we understand the systemic response of the body and how traumas and stressful situation influence the body, I think we automatically would like to change the well-being models that we have. The current models that we have of well-being are not systemic. They don't really look at the whole body as a orchestra of different parts moving and interacting together. So the traumatic adaptation continue until the entire human organism feels safe and integrates all the parts of itself that are stuck fighting or warding off trauma. I think what I found very interesting experimenting with 3-day fasting and intermittent fasting was that I didn't want to shut down any of my own experience and didn't want to have fear of experiencing the pain, because I see the majority of experiences that I had, observation that I had, people find it very difficult to experience the pain. And I think experiments with such as fasting would provide a I think a safe environment to do a healing experiments with oneself. So it's kind of like not only a scientific view of what is happening to you, but also I think a spiritual and maybe a very personal, deep connection with the self. With that said, I am going to finish my presentation by just showing you basically some of the points of Longevity Plus research group. That the aim is provide a dynamic view of resilience. That is, we are resiliencing. That means that I am not, I don't think that we need to look at resilience based on stressful situation, because we become very passive and we just look at stressful situation. And I think with that view, we're not building actively and we're not looking and upgrading adaptation responses. It is a transdisciplinary approach. We would like to have global collaboration. We would like to apply for research funds such as EU Research, Health and Research Innovative Funding Body that actively funds research ideas. We would like to look at global challenges, analysis of systemic shocks and risks, complex adaptive system view. That I think CLEA has a rich background in complexity, and I think it's one of the strongest parts of our research that we have this reservoir of scientific knowledge. I think another part that I wanted to add was conceptualizing life as a river that has these ups and downs. That I think providing this conceptual model, I think it will put people, I think it will put people in a perspective view that we're not looking at life as just snapshots of events. We're just looking at it as a dynamic river-like event and experience. And with that, we can promote cognitive fluidity and cognitive resilience that are, I think, some of the most important areas of research right now, especially when we look at resilience and well-being of the brain, especially in the aging population. It will take a proactive approach. Our systems are constantly changing, so we need to also adapt and change our well-being theories. It's about mind and body, brain, and mind, that you're going to integrate body-based approaches such as mindfulness, yoga, etc. And also it's about building community. So it's about sharing your own personal experience as well. So today I didn't want to go too much in detail of my own personal experience, but I wanted to just set the scene for this initiative. And with that said, thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to just stop the sharing and open the discussion. If you have any questions. Okay. Hello?
Yeah. Hello, I'll start my video. Okay. There's one thing I missed a bit in your presentation, that is the connection with longevity. How do you see the connection between resilience or well-being and longevity?
Well, I think longevity, I didn't want to define it as a like a solid definition, because I think longevity changes as our view of well-being and resilience changes. So longevity is really a qualitative approach that we have to well-being. This is how I view it. That's why I didn't put any special slides about longevity. Though I am aware of the research that is done on longevity, which is many of them are based on the complexity model of well-being and how the individuals are maintaining their health and the decisions that they make. So longevity is not really something that you cannot just say I am practicing longevity, or there is this specific longevity actions that I'm making, because longevity, technically speaking, it's a byproduct of living life, and the quality of living life really lead to longevity. Longevity plus, though, it's that I think positive connotation that I wanted to make in the research group, that basically it is our actions and the well-being approach that we have that leads to a long and high quality life.
Can I say about longevity? There is a great discussion whether aging is a disease that has to be cured, or it's just a part of everyday ordinary life. So in my view, to be able to live longer means that you have to be healthy as well. You can't have one without the other. It's not a matter of living so many years and be ill during those years. So we have, maybe at another stage, we have to discuss whether aging should be considered as a disease that needs treatment with different therapies, including drugs and procedures.
I think, I mean, there are, I think, two research that I studied. One was from two scientists, Sherzai, I think they're a couple. They are looking at well-being of the brain, especially in aging population. And they view cognitive degenerative diseases as a byproduct of basically bad decisions made through one's life span that is over, I think 85%, if I'm not mistaken, the statistic of those degenerative diseases could be basically treated and prevented had the organisms or people, let's say, made better decisions. So one can say aging, if we look at the diseases that are defined as diseases of aging, such as cognitive degeneration, that might be a result of not really health-oriented decisions. So therefore, I don't know if you can call them diseases, or maybe they are just bad mental models. Maybe they're bad adaptation or behavior, or bad relationship with the environment, misinformation maybe. So I'm not sure if we can really define aging as a disease. Though I think the way the way we look at disease really informs our treatment. So if we look at the disease like cognitive degeneration, again, the example, as just an inevitable outcome of aging, then I think we develop drugs and we take a medical approach through medication. So less alternative methods such as promoting better life choices, I think, is put at the center of attention. So I think it depends on the research, and also it depends on if we want to prevent aging. I think the prevention, I think it's not really the way forward, because prevention, I think people want to have fast prevention measures. I think what we see also in the current state of the world is really prevention based rather than a proactive measure.
There is
So this is what I think.
You were saying earlier that it's not just the individual, but it's the interaction of the individual with the environment. So in the case of cognitive degeneration, we shouldn't only concentrate on the brain and drugs and so on, but also the environment, smart cities, or an environment which can stimulate the brain and the body, get out of the diseased state. So I think that's a very interesting notion.
Yes, I mean, it's basically, I mean, the brain, or like, what is the brain? Brain in itself, the wiring of the brain is inspired by this connection with the environment as well. So the brain cannot develop into its full potential without having dynamic interaction with the environment. So surely if the environment is not stimulating, I think it will influence the wiring of the brain. And stressful environments are seen as environments that are not healthy for individuals. They're sources of stress. So I think definitely there needs to be a multidimensional view of well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like to make a comment about this idea of aging as a disease. I mean, I have heard the arguments of David Sinclair in his book, Lifespan, and I, to some degree, sympathize with it, but I don't think that the disease model is a good model, because as Shima said, a disease is some particular thing that's supposed to be wrong, like there is a cancer, and if you remove the tumor, then the disease is cured, or there is a virus, and if you kill the virus, then the disease is removed. If you think in health or well-being as a holistic point of view, then it is the whole body that is, as Shima says, resilience, that is adapting. And if you strengthen that ability of the body to do that, then all the deterioration that goes together with aging will also be slowed down. So in that sense, you can combat aging and increase longevity by making the whole body more resilient, and that means better able to deal with all these deteriorations, like, for example, dementia or sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscles, or osteoporosis. I mean, all these things that we associate with aging. I don't think it's a good model to say that's a disease. Either sarcopenia is a disease or aging is a disease. But having a healthy lifestyle that prevents sarcopenia will prevent these aspects of aging, and will prevent the sarcopenia, or will prevent the cognitive degeneration, will prevent the Alzheimer, etc. So the holistic point of view is, if you improve the whole body system, then all the deterioration will be slowed down, and there will be less deterioration. And so longevity will be a side effect you want of the thriving organism.
I think this discussion about aging being a disease is more has to do with funding, because if they classify aging as a disease, then the researchers can get funding towards finding a cure for this disease. That is semantics, basically, for funding. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think that is indeed what is, and it is unfortunate because our medical model is still based on combating diseases. It's not based on leading a healthy life. I mean, I am convinced that all the money that is at the moment spent for combating diseases, if a fraction of that money would be put into prevention by teaching people to have a healthy lifestyle, all these diseases, there would be much less of these diseases. There would be much less cardiovascular disease. There would be much less cancer. There would be no practically no diabetes. There would be no metabolic syndrome. The disease model is really, you wait until somebody gets ill and then you develop some very technical intervention with drugs or surgery to combat that one symptom. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the healthy part is if you make the whole organism stronger from the beginning and you sustain it throughout life, most of these diseases will not appear, or if they appear, they will appear at a much later age.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Shima, very, very interesting talk. Thank you very much. I'm very intrigued, but first of all, also the fact that you used the word coherence was very interesting for me. But what I want to, my question is the following. Even the definition of health is very complex, of course. Huh? For example, you can think of a healthy person almost never being sick, never meeting something bad in life. But that would probably not work very well, because we all have experiences, if you have some age, that some things that you meet that are quite not so nice as an experience will also make your life richer finally, you see. Huh? Mm-hmm. There is this interplay. All religions think about that. If you think of Christianity, for example, there's a lot of not completely satisfying way of thinking about it. But this idea of Christianity, everybody carries a cross. It's also the cross that makes your life richer at the same time. In which way? No, I don't mean that this is correct, but let's say in a deep, very holistic way of thinking of health, at least there should be something like that.
Okay, so you mean like I see your point. Like we have made like really deep conceptualization of religious ideas, such as a cross, for example, representative in Christianity. There has to be like something at that level that we build for well-being. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that's an example of Christianity. Every religion has some entities like that, that make people cope with bad luck, some things can happen to you where you can really not take any prevention. So how do you integrate that in a view on health?
I think
can I say, I think
yes,
what Dirk is trying to say is that trauma can be constructive, can teach you things, can make your life richer. And that is a bit, I think, what especially in Catholic religion, there is this idea that suffering is good. But what I object to is that the suffering itself is good. The experience that leads to the suffering gives you a possibility to learn. But just lying there in a hospital bed, suffering very deeply because of some tumor, that is not in itself enriching.
No, I agree.
The traumatic experience can be enriching because it's a new circumstance to which your body and mind need to adapt, and so it's a learning experience.
Yeah. And for example, suffering in itself is perhaps not a good example, but think those people that by accident make children. See, huh? They perhaps have some years of very big struggle, but finally they open another part of reality that will profoundly change them. So many things that have to do with struggle, certainly not just negative.
I don't know if anyone else wants to comment. No?
I just wanted to use a quote that I use a lot also in my course. That is Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "That which doesn't kill me makes me stronger." And that is the idea that indeed challenges to your resilience grow your resilience.
I think how I rephrase, and I think integrate what your comment is that I refer to the slides as looking at life as a river that it has ups and downs. I think by looking at life in a dynamic kind of view, I think there is an expectation and anticipation of events that are not so desirable that might happen and will happen at some point in anyone's life. I think there are events that are not that can be painful, but the perspective that one holds when experiencing those events, I think that is most interesting. That is the most important component. If providing, like, if one has a passive point of view, I think when disasters hit or trauma emerges in their life and takes place, I think the suffering itself can, like, the way we view that, it's not, I think there is a comment. Who made this comment? Wonder. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for being here. I don't know who.
I'm not saying that you have not integrated that. I just was curious. What
no, I know, but I just replied to the message that was sent in the text in the chat box. So I think the way to, for me, the most important thing about trauma is being able to learn from that trauma and integrating the lesson learned into the organism. So the organism have this reservoir of knowledge for the next event. So it's kind of improving the adaptation response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I would agree with that. There is a very weird thing that I was reading a little bit about. There is this thing that has been studied scientifically a lot, which they call the disability paradox. Yeah? So that if they study people with certain types of disabilities, not things that kill you, or not things that make you have pain all the time or something like that, that many times these people are more happy with very tough studies of happiness. I don't know. I was amazed by reading about that. There's a lot of literature on that.
I think it is. I mean, this way I mentioned, like, this book by Viktor Frankl, that is his experience, documenting his experience in, I think, concentration camp. I think it's a fascinating book. And I think for me, how I put it is that the power that exists in the individual, I think maybe we don't know the potential that exists in us without traumas. I think they really kind of provide this opportunity to unearth the potential that exists in each and any or each individual. And I think for me, this is the most healthy way to look at traumas, because in resilience, you can have maladaptation, but you can also have post-traumatic growth. That is, the individual continues to grow and expand after disaster. So I think this is the most interesting part, and connecting it to well-being is also putting the agency in the hands of people so that they can make better decisions. Like right now, the model of aging, it's kind of really, I think, very devastating. It's not really inspirational. It's very passive. It's just puts a blanket statement that aging means loss of capacities, and And because of that, we need to build infrastructures that are supporting aging individuals. I think it's a very kind of, I think it's not a really inspiring model of life. I don't look at life this way. And I think it's not healthy to have population and global perspective on life in such a way. I think, really, I think disease promoting mindset, I think.
The notion of potential, like you say it now, is probably a very interesting way to cope with that. Yeah, that traumas can reveal, can awaken potentials that people were not aware of, in a certain way that they were kind of hidden before, or perhaps not triggered, or not come to blossom.
I know Francis has an article that he looks at stressful situation as challenges. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that, maybe?
Yeah, I say that challenges are good for the organism for several reasons. One of which is it's a classic principle of cybernetics and self-organization, which is called order from noise.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea that if you shake something up, it's more likely to come down in a more coherent state. It's another version of that is the concept of anti-fragility, things that become stronger by being disturbed. And that is often because when things exist for a long while, they tend to settle down in some non-optimal configuration, but because nothing happens, it stays like that. And if then you shake it up, it has to reform, it has to re-self-organize, and it can often find then a better configuration than before. Another reason why challenges are important is that our organism is programmed by natural selection to save resources. That means it's not going to spend its resources to build bones and muscles and brain if it doesn't need to. Therefore, people who, for example, stay in a hospital bed and they don't move, they will lose muscle mass, they will lose bone mass. Or people who, after retirement, stop doing anything intellectual, they will lose brain capacity. So the organism tends not to use resources if it doesn't need to. So if you force them to use the resources, like in a situation of emergency or in a situation of an intense challenges, then these resources are mobilized and they are being used. The classic example is bodybuilding. How do you grow your muscles? By putting them under a very heavy challenge, by trying to push a weight that you couldn't push before. And in that sense, all kind of challenges can be building up of your strength and of your well-being. But it's better, I would say, to have challenges that are to some degree controllable, in the sense that they don't destroy you, of course.
Yeah. With anti-fragility, you refer to this notion like Nassim Taleb?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. I read about that also, yeah. That's intriguing, indeed.
And Marius can expand on the hormesis, which is
the
version.
I was just going to say that.
I wanted to ask that.
Yes. Well, it's the same principle, basically. Hormesis is a dose-response relationship. In other words, a small dose of something that is dangerous or poisonous or stressful shakes up the system and creates ways to make it stronger. And we have some situations where it is better to do something bad for our health than not do it at all. An example is with wine, for example. There's been research showing that not drinking at all wine is worse than drinking 1 or 2 glasses. So 1 or 2 glasses of wine which contain resveratrol and other so-called, not poisonous, but challenging substances, stimulate the health of the body to make it stronger. Whereas if you don't drink at all wine, you don't have this particular stimulus. And the same is true for any other aspect. The exercise is typical. Mental stress, up to a point. There is always a level of stimulation that is optimal. If you go over that level, then it becomes dangerous or damaging.
Even a vaccine works in that way.
Yes, okay, yes. You can see it's a universal phenomenon. You can see it in any aspect of the human body, of life, health, and again, as in societies, in culture. I think it's a very interesting concept to be discussed.
And that makes the definition of health also very complex, of course.
Since not, because if you define it as resiliency, that means resilience against all possible kind of threats and perturbations. So of course there's always a limit. You can go to a sauna that's 100 degrees and survive, but probably you wouldn't survive it if it was 500 degrees. So of course there's always a limit, but you can try to extend the limit by running longer. You extend your physical capabilities by going to a sauna that's a little bit hotter than the previous one. You can also extend your capabilities, and like that you build up strength.
Yes, but only up to a point though. If you keep going, you will burn up.
Yeah.
I think something I wanted to emphasize is that we are speaking, I think, from a very privileged maybe place, and assuming maybe that everyone really wants to live a long life. There are people who are suffering from depression, who are in a very extremely difficult situation, that their aspiration for well-being might not be just doing exercise. It's very extremely difficult to kind of motivate these individuals to have a longevity plus point of view. With that, I want to say, like, the definition of health and well-being has a personal component into it as well. As I mentioned, this model of salatogenesis, the motivational factor that the person views life as a valuable experience, and the whole experience of life as something valuable, a very important part of well-being. So in a way, our decisions about the courses of our action in our life is really connected to the way that we are defining life itself, that my life has a value, that my life is important, that life itself is important. So I think this is the kind of, I think this is like the basis of well-being. If someone doesn't see the value of life, I don't think that they care about going to sauna or doing exercise. They don't see life valuable. And I think they have this constant internal dialogue. What's the point? What's the point? I know many people who think like that. What's the point of doing this? What's the point of doing 20 minutes more exercise? What's the point of eating healthy? What's the point of, the moment that the person is really interrogating life in such a, I think, antagonistic manner, I think it's very difficult to really come up with a model of well-being that is holistic, that is based on the beauty of life and the value of life. The model that we have is based on, life is tough. You're going to have painful and traumatic experiences. You're going to get sick. And eventually, if you don't care, you're going to die. At certain age, it's more likely to die by diseases that compared to young ages. So it's really kind of, I think it doesn't look at life as something valuable that can be lived beautifully, that can be lived really greatly. So I think this is what I am trying to kind of put forward as looking at life differently. I don't know if anyone wants to make any comment.
I would agree with that completely, Shima.
If I wanted to ask to unmute if you guys want to join the conversation, because we'd great to hear from you as well.
Hi, Shima.
Hi, thank you so much for joining.
I wrote some things down. As this longevity is a very valuable thing for an individual, I was wondering if there is also a sort of collective valueness towards this longevity, and because you're mentioning that you want to go global with this research, in a way, is there also a cultural differences of these between these or recording these values, because you mentioned a moment ago, people who value life go to saunas, they sport, they do whatever we do from a Western point of view. But if you go global, how do you see the cultural differences in a research project like this? It's just out of curiousness, but I have no idea how to do it anyway. So.
I mean, thank you so much for the question. I think it's a great question. I personally think, like, this is my own personal opinion. It's not based on a scientific article. I think there is definitely a collective value in having a longevity point of view, because if we look at the current global health status of the world and the amount of money that costs the whole global health to maintaining and providing treatment for diseases, not just the pandemic, also the pandemic of obesity, for example, the pandemic of lack of movement, sedentary lifestyle, the cost that the whole global system is paying, the cost of losing human potential because of cognitive degeneration diseases, I think it's huge. Like, imagine a world that people are happier, people have like a better perspective of the world. I think we will have a different world. We don't have that high level of suicide. I think we will make better systems also, because I think a happy individual will build better systems also, because the mindset of kind of long-term thinking, that my life has a short-term span, but it also has life long-term basically aspect to it. I think I will become more careful and more, I think, mindful of the choices that I make, because I see also myself as a valuable member of the global community. So this is the way I formulate it, but I definitely think that there are different value matrices around the world. I mean, maybe in Belgium, maybe playing certain sports is really considered as something like fashionable or socially constructed agreement between people, that going to sauna or things like that are valuable. But you look at, for example, other countries, it might not be the way to do the well-being kind of ritual, so to speak. So I think definitely there are differences. So there is no business as usual or kind of a single terminology that can be used around the world. But I also think, I think Marius can add to this, because different populations have different vulnerabilities and susceptibilities as well, in terms of like, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's not only a matter of dividing people by age and thinking about the vulnerabilities of the different ages. It's also a matter of cultures and a matter of geographical locations. So some procedure that may be okay for a European country may not suit another country. And the typical example here is the Mediterranean diet. I was talking to some Indian scientists who said they tried to introduce the Mediterranean diet in India, and the people didn't like it. They got ill. They just didn't use it because culturally and ingredient-wise, it's different. So we should take these things into account, and also take individual people into account. Somebody who lives in one country may not follow the habits of that country, and specifically follow the habits of another country within a group of people. So what I'm trying to say is that everybody is an individual, and we should see them as individuals. And not only that, but see them as individuals who can change with time. So something that is good for me now may not be good for me in 2 weeks' time. Mm-hmm. So it's a constant dynamic process. But coming back to the global values, I would like to ask you, why do you think you deserve, let's say, why do you think you deserve to be healthy and live longer? What's the point of that? Why should you live longer and healthier? What's the benefit to the general system, to the world? So it's an open question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we contribute to the common good? Do we contribute to the development of the world, of society with our own means? Do we contribute to the betterment of human race? Or we just live there and be healthy and then die?
I mean, are you asking me or you're asking everyone?
Yeah, it's a question that I have in my mind, and
Okay.
I ask people every now and again. They say, "I want to be healthy and live for many years."
I think it has, for me, I think it's a personal responsibility, and like, it's like, you know, like COVID, right? Why are you wearing masks? I mean, you're wearing it for yourself, but you're also protecting others, right?
Yeah.
So well-being, I think, for me, part of it definitely is a personal journey. Like, everyone has different, basically, objectives for their own life. But by being healthy, I think you're supporting the planet as well. Because if you're, for example, let's say you're a scientist or like you're interested in certain ideas, and your research can potentially have positive impacts on the planet. You can also become an inspiring individual. So I don't think that we live in our own bubbles. And this is my perspective, but I'm also interested to hear from others in this. Some of you didn't talk at all, so if you're interested to say something, it would be great. Yes, please.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had to immediately go out and now back, so I'm not sure what you have been discussing in the meantime. But I just had a question for clarification, because from your presentation, which I found very exciting, I wondered if you define imbalance disorder as disease and balance and order as health, and could it not just be the other way around, that in times sometimes you need a disorder to be healthy, and then aging becomes a healthy way of living, because if you would be stable you would be unhealthy? And that also maybe relates to the distinction that is implicit between mind and body in our discourses of health and disease. Mm-hmm. What is being healthy? What is being unhealthy? And that even could be reduced to different parts of our being, and which is always more than human being, given that a lot of our health, for instance, is determined by the health of the gut microbiota inside, or the other microbiomes of the gut of the animals we eat. They also affect our health. So the food systems, microbiomes, all together are part in having our health. And sometimes in certain contexts, one type of microbiota is very good for health, but if it moves in another part of the intestine, it becomes dangerous for the health. So there is also this context related aspect to health and well-being, because, and there I want to draw in the society perspective as well as a social anthropologist predominantly. In how does a society define health and well-being? Because that also creates aspirations to live up to, and can also create a feeling. In medical anthropology, we distinguish between disease and illness. And that's an important distinction because disease is often attributed to the biological agents through biomedicine, whereas illness is, let's say, the kind of social experience of being sick. But that is also culturally shaped. So depression might not exist in certain cultures, but they might have susto instead, which then shapes the way mental illness is being expressed. So the context of expression of phenomena is also very important, and the social context of it. Yeah, I'm now going a bit quick, but because there was the social meaning aspect, which I was wanting to push a bit from that order. Yeah, because also some of the continuum terms felt a bit like having a qualification or a kind of judgment in it. High anxiety, maybe in a certain context, it would be good to have high anxiety. It would be even life-saving to be anxious. But I know you distinguish then with eustress as a positive kind of stress. But I think if your life is threatened by a Nazi regime, I think it still can be life-saving to still have that negative stress as well. So I think there is this, I find it really interesting, the models that you were pursuing and the concepts, but I just wanted to kind of, query a few additional points there.
Thank you so much. I think what I didn't go into the details of that model is my view was, my intention was to provide like a hyperspace of different continuums interacting with each other. That is, you can move, like you can play with all these factors. So for example, as you say, like sometimes having high anxiety is really good because it allows the individual to have focus and really recruit and mobilize energy to the muscles for reaction toward whatever it is that is threatening life, organism's life. So that model is not set like a passive model that you have to move everything by one continuum and say this is health. So it's really a playful interaction of all of these components. That's why I put many layers of looking at well-being, like well-being of a company, well-being of a society. That's really interaction of all these components together. So I just clarify that.
Yeah.
But I really like what the comment you made about this social agreement and the societal aspects of aging. So as you were explaining that, it reminded me of like, I think if I compare like the way aging is perceived in each society, I think it has impact on the way that people would define their experience of life. For example, if aging is defined as something that you age and you die anyway, and this is a part of life, but compared to, well, you know, there is aging, but you can also do something about it, such as exercise or have an active lifestyle, or aging is an integral part of life. It's not something negative. So you can design aging experience as something valuable. As you mentioned, I don't think that aging is an illness, but I think we contribute to aging as becoming an illness or becoming a disease.
Yeah, I agree. But I think in some, like if you want to reach, now I'm working in Buddhist societies in Bhutan and Sri Lanka. Then if for monks, it's eventually to let go of desire in the last phase before death, so that you can be reborn in the next life. So the aim of this life is to have a better rebirth in the next life. So I'm just wondering, then aging is something really good, because you can use it to acquire merit, to improve it. And also that connects to the way we conceptualize health in an anthropocentric way, because you might be reborn as a good spirit, or you might be reborn as an elephant or with big mental capacities. So I'm just, yeah, that's the, so I'm also thinking about whether we conceptualize health not too much as human health, whereas it's actually more than human health, or other than human health that is implied in it. And now in the UN or the Eat Lancet, they speak about planetary health.
Exactly.
Precisely to point at these interrelations upon which we depend in our health. So we need healthy animals, we need healthy environments, we need good social environments to improve our health. I mean, in the traditional Indian system, they say you have to eat one evening with very smart people, another evening with very fun people, and another evening you have to smoke. So they have a kind of holistic sense of what is being healthy. And it's not just in a biological sense, it's not in a humoral sense, it's not, but also in a it's a eco-health system. And now the public health is increasingly moving towards this public eco-health, precisely because the life conditions and so many other aspects are involved in creating good health. As we also see with lockdown in COVID-19. So, I mean, it's very different from me being in my cabin in Norway now versus somebody locked in a small studio. So, I mean, it's, but I really enjoyed your talk, and it's very fascinating work. So I'd be very happy to join in the further conversation.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I also very much very inspired by this eco-health system model. I think it's maybe it really speaks to the core of what we're trying to do. I don't know if you're interested, if you have time, maybe you want to be to presenting your work maybe for the next seminars if you're interested.
I would be very happy to do so, so we can see where we match, where we maybe don't match, and from that we can take it maybe further or not.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. Is I don't know if Francis Marius Gies, I hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Derek. What's the?
I said Derek or Diederik. Yeah.
No, Derek, I know your name, but this gentleman,
it's a very difficult name.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. It's guys. Yeah. And what Wim says interests me a lot, because the planet itself seems to react as a sort of a holistic system, in such a way that it's yeah. I'm still intrigued about this longevity idea because of there seems to be a certain bidirectional transmission of planetary necessities that involves this health, this human health as well, and by not taking care for this biodiversity, we don't seem to survive, and vice versa. So we need our own survival in order to save the planet, but the planet has to be saved in order to survive, and then to get older and get more healthy. And then you're talking on a very global scale and not cultural based, and it's really about just being part of the biodiversity.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea, this longevity. I'm very grateful for this subject as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much for participating. One thing about presentation is that because when you present and everybody is muted, I had this thought that, are they following what I'm saying, or are they saying what does she talk about? Like, what is she talking? So I was a little bit worried about like how it will be perceived, because I wanted to keep it global enough, but not really technical for the first presentation. So I really appreciate your presence and contribution. I don't know, Francis or Derek, Marius, if you want to react to what Wim just shared.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Francis. Go ahead, Francis.
Well, well, the context, of course, is always important, but it's a bit a problem I often have with my research, not specifically about health, but about systems in general. You have kind of, let's put it simply, two camps. The people who want to have everything absolutely well-defined, and the people who are kind of relativistic, who says it's all relative and dependent on context. While my approach, I think, integrates those two. That's to say that I want a system that is as adaptable as possible. So the system is adaptable in the sense that it can adapt to lots of different contexts, but the adaptability itself is absolute. You have systems that are adaptable and you have systems that are less adaptable. So the adaptability combines the people who want to have something solid that they can count on, and the people who say that everything is relative and everything is context dependent. If you have an adaptable system, it can adapt to all the contexts, but it is none of these contexts. It has the flexibility. And I think Shima and I are very much on the same wavelength of that the real resistance or the real resilience or the real health is this fluidity, this adaptability. So I think in that sense there is no problem with what Wim was saying.
Mm-hmm. Marius?
Yes, talking about resilience, I just want to put another idea forward. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I believe it. We're talking about saving the planet and living naturally and so on. If the planet goes from bad to worse, is it a bad thing for us if we are able to adapt to the new changes? If there is pollution, if there is different problems that affect the atmosphere and the environment, if we are able to adapt to these challenges and adapt successfully and overcome them, then what difference does it make?
I think this is like a chicken and egg problem, because, you know, it's like COVID, right? COVID was crisis at the beginning, but is it really now a crisis? I mean, if you put the dying population, unfortunately, like the masks and all these adaptations that we made, I think is incredible. If we look at it as an adaptation, a global adaptation response, I mean, less than a year, like vaccines are made. It's extraordinary. So, but the supportive system is suffering as well. So the cost of adaptation is also something that we need to consider. It comes to my mind. I don't know if it's like really answered to your question, but
it's just an open question again for us to think about.
what I would answer to Marius is that we can adapt to stresses, but there are stresses that actually reduce the richness of the world. So, for example, biodiversity. Yes, we could adapt to a world where there's much less biodiversity, but that world would have much less potential than one in which there is a biodiversity. On the other hand, what you say about pollution, you could have, for example, a level of more sulfur dioxide or NOx in the environment, and we could adapt to that, and probably the other species would also adapt to that. Some would adapt better, some would adapt worse, but if the overall effect on biodiversity is not big, then I could say, yeah, okay, we can adapt to stresses in that sense. But the stresses that are irreversible in the sense that you lose variety, those I would rather not adapt to. I would rather avoid and prevent.
Yeah, thermodynamics. Yes. Thermodynamics also talks about tipping points and runaway processes. So we want to maybe avoid that, but it also again then depends from whose perspective, from the human perspective or the animal's perspective, or that's yeah, just a small thought I wanted to add.
Thank you.
I have a small thing to add to the question of Marius there. We all learned about exponential growth now with the virus. Everybody knows now about that. And the question of Marius was, if we look for our well-being, and Shima already answered, so it's a little bit adding to that answer of Shima. I think if we look for our personal well-being, does it help the world? Is it good for the whole world? I think there is also an exponential growth there, you see. If every individual becomes more healthy, the world will become more healthy, even exponentially. So there's a kind of feedback mechanism that is positive in the same way like the negative feedback mechanism of the virus, the opposite actually, you see. And you can see that even that there are these fluctuations in different countries. You can go to a country where most people are friendly, and then you find a friendly country. You can sometimes go to a country where most people are not friendly at all. So I think this is this effect of this exponential growth of friendliness, and also an exponential growth of unfriendliness in a certain way. And so, yeah, I think that individual well-being really affects a lot the social well-being, much more than people imagine, even, I think.
I mean, I love what you mentioned: exponential growth of friendliness, happiness, well-being, and maybe hopefully planetary resilience. And I also agree with countries that are like, people are sad there. I don't think that you can spend like their time. It's just like it's kind of torture. You don't want to torture yourself, right? So you want to go somewhere that people are healthy, right? So it's kind of a global effect, I would say.
Yeah, and the global effect is much stronger, I think, than we imagine intuitively.
Yeah.
Which we now see on the internet. The global effect of hate on the internet. That's the opposite again. It's very stronger than anybody would have imagined 10 years ago. By the way, there's a funny thing. There is also an internet where people put music, SoundCloud it's called. Everybody's incredibly positive there. So it flipped in the other side. You can make comments like on Facebook, but it's incredibly positive. Even if somebody puts some music that is really ugly, they will not say it. They will look for the good in it. And I don't know if this is really scientifically explainable, but I've often thought, I've had some music like that on SoundCloud. I'm amazed by the positivity of all this group, It's a very good group also. It's just the opposite of Facebook, where you have a lot of negativity, except if you remain in a group where there is less negativity. But so these effects are much bigger than people imagine, I think.
Exactly. And I think this is the narrative that needs to be made about well-being, like why it is important to be healthy. It's kind of like this chain reaction impact of my well-being on your well-being, and off we go, the whole planet.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. We're running out of time, it's 6:45. I have another meeting in half an hour, so I just wanted to ask you if you have any final statement, or if you want to just add some points, please do so. I will share the slide and the presentation during the week. And if you want to present, just drop me and Natalie an email with your suggested basically title and an abstract and biography of yourself, and we will have the same kind of discussion.
Okay, that would be excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all your contribution. Thank you, Marius, for joining.
Thank
Derek, Wim, Francis. If there is nothing to add.
I just wanted to make one
Yes,
small remark. I've been doing research also on happiness and on politics of happiness. And then there is kind of this assumption that if people want to be happy, that's actually very selfish. And why should we, as a politicians, try to make people more happy? But there's plenty of research that shows that happy people are more productive in all respects. They are more moral, they are more creative, they are more friendly, they can be more trusted. So making an individual happy helps everybody around that individual. So it is indeed, as Dirk says, this exponential effect that making people feel better individually will also make other people feel better.
In Bhutan, they work with the Brutto National Happiness instead of BNP. So,
yeah.
Excellent. Marius, do you have any final notes?
No, only to say that I see you with big jumpers and thick clothes. Here we have 35 degrees in Cyprus. So it's 8 o'clock in the evening, and I'll probably go for a swim in the sea.
Oh my God, this is like, you broke my heart right at the end of this presentation.
Well, it's your fault. You were here and you left.
Yes, or maybe I have to come back to Cyprus.
That would be good, yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, everyone. Really have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Bye, bye, thank you.